In lesson 4.5, we're going to be talking about finding equivalent forms of fractions. The equivalent means the same value, and so equivalent fractions are fractions that name the same amount. And so for an example, real quick, we could think of 2/3, which is equivalent to 4/6, which is equivalent to 8/12, which is equivalent to 16/24, which is equivalent to 32/48. And we'll look at how did we get to each of those equivalent fractions here in a second. And a fraction is in simplest form when the only common factor of the numerator and denominator is 1. If it wasn't 1, then you can simplify it. So an example of this, if we have 6/9, we need to write this in other forms or in other equivalent fractions. Well, we can multiply our numerator and denominator each by 2. 6 times 2 is 12. 9 times 2 is 18. So 12/18 is equivalent to 6/9. We can multiply it by 3 and say 6 times 3 is 18, and 9 times 3 is 27. So 18/27 is equivalent to 6/9. We could go the opposite direction and simplify 6/9 because there's a common denominator or common factor between 6 and 9, which would be 3, and so 6 divided by 3 is 2, and 9 divided by 3 is 3. So 2/3 is equivalent to 6/9. So we could look at this and say, well, 6/9 is equivalent to 12/18, which is equivalent to 18/27, which is also equivalent to 2/3. So you go ahead and practice. We'll get rid of this part here first. Go ahead and practice, and we'll check here in 1 second. Alright, let's check this. So we have 4/10, and we could look at this and say, well, 4/10, if I wanted to make a equivalent fraction and multiply it by 2, so for this one I would have times 2, and I'd end up with 8/20. But then if I wanted to simplify and say I'm going to divide by 2, because 4 and 10 are both even, so they have a common factor of 2, and I could get 2/5. Each of these are equivalent fraction, 8/20, 4/10, and 2/5. So let's also look at our 5/8. And 5/8, we can multiply that times 2. And whatever you do to your numerator, you have to do to your denominator. And so 5/8, we could get 10/16. And 5/8, they don't have any common factors, so we can't simplify 5/8. So we can multiply this again and say times 2. And we can get 20/32. Those are all equivalent fractions. We can look at this and say that 5/8 is equivalent to 10/16, which is equivalent to 20/32. Alright, let's go to another example. Simplify using the greatest common factor. So writing 16/40 in simplest form. Well, to find our common factors, we could do a variety of different ways. It's what we've been practicing the last few lessons. But common factors of 16, or our factors of 16 are 1 and 16, 2 and 8, and then 4 squared is 16. And then for 40, well, we have 1 and 40, we have 2 and 20, we have 4 and 10, and of course then we have 5 and 8. So if we look at our common factor, greatest common factor, common factor is 8 between the two. They each share a 4, a 2, and a 1, but the 8 is the greatest common factor. So we could simplify 16/40 by dividing by 8. So 16 divided by 2, or 16 divided by 8 is 2, and 40 divided by 8 is 5. So the simplest form, 16/40, would simplify down to 2/5. Now we could work that down and say, well, 16/40, we could divide that by 2 and get 8/20, but they're both even. So we could simplify that again, divide by 2, and we get 4/10, and they're both even numbers, so we could divide that again by 2, and we get 2/5. The same process is going through this, but we have 2 times 2 times 2, and 4 times 2 is 8. 8 is our greatest common factor. Whatever method that you look at this, we can simplify just by 8 and get to our simplest form much quicker. So for number 3, using prime factorization. So a store stocks 12 types of blue pens, 6 types of black pens, 2 types of red pens. So they have quite a variety. In simplest form, what fraction of the types of pens are blue? So we need to look at this. Which ones are blue? Add to find the total number of pen types to find the denominator. So 12 plus 6 plus 2, we get 20. So that is our total number of pens that they have. So total type of blue pens. Well, they have 12 of them out of a total number of 20. So we need to find out what is the simplest form of doing this. So to find the common factors, well, what numbers make up 12? Our prime factorization of 12, well, 2 times 2 times 3 make 12. And then for 20, prime factorization, we'd end up with 2 times 2 times 5. Now, how do we get that real fast? Remember our prime factorization? We could say, well, 12 is 2 and 6 is 2 and 3. So that's why we have 2, 2, and 3. And then for 20, we have 2 and 10 can be broken down to 2 and 5. So 2, 2, and 5. Getting back to our problem here, though, we have to now divide to simplify this. So 2, 2, and 3, and 2, 2, and 5. Well, we need to simplify this. We can cancel these out. If I have a number in the numerator and also in the denominator, they cancel each other out. So that's why we have these scratch marks already. And this 2 and this 2 cancel each other out, so we get 1 in both numerator and denominator. And these 2 cancel each other out, so we get a 1 in our numerator and denominator here as well. So there are 3/5 of the type of pens are blue. We could do that a much quicker way. If this method right here, going in prime factorization, that is a little complicated. We could look at this and say, well, 12/20, common factors between 12 and 20, well, they both share a 4 as a factor. So we can divide 12 divided by 4 and get 3, and 20 divided by 4 and we get 5, and we get 3/5 much quicker. Either method works. If prime factorization is your way, excellent. Otherwise, we can look at, well, our greatest common factor would be 4, so we could simplify that way as well. So here's where you go ahead and check to see if you are understanding this. We'll follow up here in a second. Alright, so for writing 24/32 in simplest form, well, we have 24 over 32, so 24 over 32. We could simplify that down, and common factor would be, we could look at it, well, they're both even. So we could divide each one by 2, and we would get 12/16. But they're still even, so we could divide that by 2. Each one by 2, and we get 6/8. Well, it's still even, so we could divide that by 2. and we can get 3/4. Once the numerator is one digit away from the denominator, that is kind of a clear indicator that you are in simplest form. But they also don't share any other common factors, so then we're in simplest form as well. In simplest form for number 3, in simplest form, what fractions of the types of pens in example 3 are red pens? Well, you can look above, but I've got the direction right here. So, in simplest form, well, are red pens. Well, how many are red? Well, we have 2 types of red pens. And remember, we had 20 total pens, or 20 different types of pens, and if 2 of them are red, we could simplify that down and divide each one by 2, because both 2 and 20 are even, and we get 1/10. From here, that's the end of finding equivalent forms of fractions.